Hello, and welcome to the Storied Human. Today, my guest is Brittany Johnson, and she's started at an early age to learn the positive benefits of setting intention and setting goals. I can't wait to talk to her. She's a licensed mental health counselor, an author, and a sabotage guru. In fact, when you go to her website, she has a great quiz called What's Your Self-Sabotage Style? She took herself back to college. She got her bachelor's in psychology and her master's in mental health counseling. As a licensed therapist, Brittany has worked with several populations, including domestic violence survivors, children, families, and individuals. Through the years, Brittany has learned and taken specialized training in trauma-focused modalities, including trauma-focused cognitive, behavioral, and collaborative problem solving. Brittany is an approved consultant in eye movement desensitization reprocessing, or EMDR, and she uses it to help her clients process anxiety and past trauma. Through her work with clients, Brittany realized that many of her clients are blocking themselves. That led to Brittany writing her Amazon bestseller, Get Out of Your Own Way, 21 Days to Stop Self-Sabotage. Today, Brittany uses her knowledge to work with both counseling clients and consulting clients to set goals and identify and clear blocks. Brittany also facilitates trainings, workshops, and seminars on trauma, mental health, anxiety, sabotage, and goal setting, purpose setting. So Brittany is busy. Welcome, Brittany. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's so good to have you. I've been looking forward to talking to you. So I would like to start with, first of all, taking yourself, putting yourself through school, right? I got a sense that you didn't do it right away. That's not easy. What drove you? Like, what made you decide to do that?
I went to college initially after high school, but I met my husband, and we had a baby. And so
Okay.
I took time off to be a mom. And then there was a series of things that happened. One of them being that there was just this one particular day where my son wanted something to eat at a fast food restaurant. I had just got paid. But because I didn't have a college education, the pay was really low. And I, barely could afford to buy him a Happy Meal. And this was 20 years ago. So Happy Meals were not what they are today, right? So I could barely afford it. And so that night, I set out a goal that I was going to go back to school and I was going to make sure that I could feed myself and my son. And my husband was also about, he was in college as well. So I just set a goal that I wanted to make sure that we were financially in a good place. And so that's what made me go back.
That is very powerful and not easy with the child.
No.
And a husband. You got a family, you got a whole,
yes,
lots of responsibilities.
Yes.
And you stuck with it long enough to get a master's, which again is not easy. I'm always intrigued by people who stick with their goals. I mean, it took years, right?
Yes. And I had 2 more children in the mix of that too. So
okay, so you're definitely a multitasker.
Yes.
So how do you do that? I mean, were there lots of long, late nights? I mean, how do you get through all that?
So that's actually what led me to starting to help people set goals and do things like that was because I realized that the way to get all those things done was I needed to be on a schedule. And so I literally set myself a schedule. And that schedule included making sure that during the daytime hours, I was doing everything with my children. I also was working full time. So I literally would go to work. The evenings were for my family. And then at night, I would stay up just a little bit later to study and do things like that. And then I was fortunate that for my bachelor's degree, they had a program for adults. And so my classes were in the evening and on the weekends. So that helped as well. So that's kind of how I did that.
I still am very amazed that you were able to, not a lot of people could do all that.
Yes.
So, and I'm very intrigued too, that you seem like a natural goal setter and that became sort of a focus for you and trying to help other people. How did you become a natural goal setter?
Probably it's just seeing that I wanted things and I wanted to be able to do those things. And I'm going to say too, probably watching my mom. And my mom was not able to go to college. She had a baby at 17. And so she really, pushed us children to go to college and to finish. And so that was really what it was. And then part of it too, if I'm going to be completely transparent, is I still had kind of a teenage mindset with that. When someone tells you you can't do something, you want to prove them wrong.
Oh, I
So
love
that
that.
also drove a lot of my goal setting early in my life, was wanting to prove people wrong, that I could go back to school as a mom. I could get married. I could, work full time.
Yeah.
I could do all these things. And so that really was what it was.
That's so cool. It's funny. I just was telling somebody about my dad who was a pilot. And when I was young, I don't think I realized the impact that he had on me. But now that I'm older and I've lost him recently, I started to think about, he did a similar thing to you, is that he wanted to be a pilot really bad. He wasn't in the military. And
Okay.
he said, I'm going to be a pilot. And my mother said, okay. And they had two little kids.
Mhm.
And he worked 2 or 3 jobs all the time. I always saw him working because he had to get his hours on
Yes.
certain planes,
Yes.
It took him 10 years. When I look back on it, I'm like, Brittany, I don't know if I would stick with something for 10 years. But he became a pilot and he got hired by Eastern. And so even though I didn't get it when I was young, I'm so struck now. And I see that in you, that ability to stay with something, because maybe we can achieve a goal that's short term, right? But to keep your eye on the prize for years. And I realized, just like you said, your mother set an example for you. My father, and I didn't even connect it until recently, really set an example for me. And that's very powerful that I also love that teenage, like, I'll show you,
Yes.
You have that spunk, like, what do you mean I can't do this?
Mhm.
So you got through that and you started, like, I noticed that you focus on self-sabotage. It's really I took your quiz. I was like, I should get my results. That's fascinating to me because there's a lot of ways that we do sabotage ourselves.
Yes. Yes.
So you began to center on that. And I would love to hear more about that.
So that, well, so the way that I ended up talking about self-sabotage was, I set out a goal to write a book on anxiety, because anxiety still is, I guess, my primary focus with clients. It was anxiety. People came to see me because they were anxious. And so I wanted to write a book about, anxiety, to make it like a self-help for people who couldn't go to, therapy. And through the course of trying to write the book, I just couldn't do it. Every time I sat down and started to write, like, these thoughts of, like, you don't have enough experience, you don't have enough education, like, all of these things just kept showing up. And I'm like, what is going on? So I started writing about the process that I took to get over all of that, to then write my book on anxiety. And that's how the book on self-sabotage came about. It
That's
was
so
all the
interesting.
things that
Yeah.
I noticed, that I was doing, and the thoughts that were coming up. But then as I was writing it, I was like, wait, these are the same things I do with clients. The topic might be different, right? We might be talking about anxiety, or we're talking about trauma, but the steps were still the same. It was still, what's the self-talk that you have that's keeping you from moving forward? What are the
Right.
things that show up when you're triggered? What does this look like? What is the reason that you're doing this? What is your big why? Which is that goal setting piece as well. And so
Yeah.
that was kind of how I wrote about self-sabotage, because I was doing it to myself, trying to write about anxiety, and then watching my clients and talking to family and friends. And social media is really a great research spot. And so I
Yeah.
got on Facebook and Instagram and just started looking at what people were talking about. And sabotage was, like, for me, was the common theme under all of it.
I'm fascinated by that because before I started the podcast, I took a podcasting class with Kathy Heller, and she has
Mhm.
a super successful podcast. And a lot of it was, we did learn how to do a podcast, but we also learned mindset and how to believe in yourself and move forward. And
Mhm.
so much of it was that, like, identifying, like how you're saying, I don't have enough, I was like, who am I to start a podcast? Or,
Uh-huh.
I don't know enough to do this, or,
Yes.
all those things that get in your way. And it was so useful to me because I was forced to face that I had this pattern of trying new things, right? As an adult, not
Mhm.
telling anyone else I was trying them. So
Okay.
that when I didn't finish them, no one knew.
No one knew.
It's like,
Uh-huh.
and I
Oh,
had to
okay.
face that head on. And
Uh-huh.
I don't know what it was about. Maybe it's timing, or, you're just sick of your behavior, whatever it was. I think partly too, it was the people in the class. We stayed together and supported
Mhm.
each other. I learned so much about how to move forward. And I just made a promise to myself. I said, you're not going to do that this time. You're going to keep going and you're going to do this.
I
And
love that.
what a feeling that was to break that
Yes.
habit. And also just to even admit that habit. Like I never really admitted that to people, how many things I did that with.
Yes.
And what a waste of time that was. I just
Right.
looked
And
back
now
on
look
it.
at you and look at what happened when you did finally break the habit and got out of your own way.
I can't even tell you. I can't even tell you the feeling.
Mhm.
But also therapy's always helped me. Like even one time on a job, I just had this person I couldn't handle. And I was, a contractor and she wasn't. And so I had to be really, careful and,
Yes.
and political. And I just wasn't solving it. And I said, how can I be, this old and supposedly smart and not be able to solve this? This person's driving me nuts. And I just got like a quick set of sessions with somebody I found through my insurance, and she talked me through it. So I'm a huge proponent of, short term, long term, whatever you need.
Yes.
I really believe in therapy and I really love the work that you do because a lot of us are stuck
Yes.
and we don't even know. Like you said,
And we
self-talk.
don't. Yeah.
I love that. Like my one friend used to say, somebody, I forget who told her, but she said, when I get a thought sometimes in my head, she said, someone taught me to ask who is speaking.
Yes.
So
That's so
powerful.
important.
And the things that we hold on to from our childhood that we don't even know that those aren't
Yes.
really our thoughts. We don't really, in fact, if you take them out and look at them, we don't even believe them anymore. But if you don't look at them, so I love that you're doing this work because I think it's freeing a lot of people.
Yes.
And I really want to hear more about the EMDR because I have heard of it, but I don't know much about it. And I think my listeners would love to know more about it.
Yeah. So EMDR, it was created by Dr. Francine Shapiro back in the 80s. She actually created it while working with military personnel who were having PTSD. And so what EMDR in short term or short form, what EMDR does is that it takes you back to a memory or cognition or belief that you have about yourself. And we look at all the times that you kind of had that throughout your life. And then EMDR helps you to get those things unstuck. And so then your brain does all the work. So we'll set up a scene, is what I like to call it with my clients. So we'll do something like, let's say your belief is that you're not good enough, or that's the thing that comes up. That's the common self-talk, is that you're not good enough. So we'll find an incident where that happened. And then we will take you back to that incident in your mind. So it's not hypnosis, you're fully awake. So we'll take you back to that incident, and you will do some type of bilateral or dual attention. So bilateral can be marching in place. It could be, hand movement across in front of your eyes. It could be cross body tapping, any type of thing that just kind of gets you to think about two things at once, essentially. And then what happens is your brain goes back to that moment and lets you really slow down to see what actually was happening, so that you can see like, oh, it's not that I wasn't good enough. I didn't have enough information, or there was this other person that was doing something that was triggering me to do this thing, and this was my reaction to it. And so EMDR just helps you kind of get things that are stuck unstuck.
That's so cool. So how does the physical part of it help do that? I'm so interested in that.
So the physical part just gives you that dual attention. So what we found is that when people have some type of trauma or anxiety, um, you're hyper focused on it, even when you don't realize that you are. And so if you can get a distraction in there, it gives you space to like let your brain do its job of clearing that thing out, or letting you know that it's not as serious as you thought. And so that's what the physical part does, is it's just that distraction that gives you just a moment to be able to see like, oh wait, yeah, this isn't what I thought it was.
That's so cool. I think that can help so many people because they
Yes.
don't even know what really happened or what they really thought.
Yes.
And that's kind of what I always talk about too, is like you're holding on to memories sometimes. Are they serving you? Like whose memories are they? Or did you really remember that right? Things that happened when you were little. I mean, we don't really know how to store what happened to us. We're not adults. It's very interesting to me.
And our bodies carry it. Like our bodies do carry what we experience. And so sometimes there are people that I work with who have what we call attachment related trauma. And so those are people who were, neglected emotionally, sometimes emotionally and physically. They were abused, or they just grew up in households where there were not there wasn't a loving parent involved, or any type of figure. And so sometimes it's nonverbal. You don't even have words for it, but your body remembers. And
Your
so
body carries it.
we'll do things where we're like, where do you feel it in your body? And that's something you can even think about when you're thinking about not going through with something. Or if you flash back for a second to before you took that course, what was your body doing when you would give up on a goal? Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we will ask questions like that. Like, what were you feeling and where were you feeling it? What part of your body carries that for you? And then we'll do the same thing. We'll just have you notice this body sensation, with this paired with this kind of belief that you have about yourself. And
Yeah.
then we'll do some type of distraction to help you kind of overcome that.
I love that you're using the actual brain, like how it works, to help the
Yes.
person.
Yes.
So tell me more about the book. Like, how long did it take to write? Like, how did you go about that with all that you have going on?
So surprisingly, the book only took 30 days to write.
Oh my gosh.
And it was primarily because I was in a state of heavy grief. My mom had died the year before, and I wanted something and needed something to distract me, to get me out of this grief cycle. So that's what made me decide to try to, one of my friends was like, why don't you write a book on anxiety? You're always talking about anxiety. You're always helping people with it. Even when you're not in session, we're out in public and people are asking you questions. Why don't you just write about it? And I was like, oh, that's a good idea. But it really started out of just this heavy grief I was having, over the loss of my mother. And then from there, it has just taken off.
What a
And
great
it's
way to
just kind
deal
of
with
become
grief.
the thing
Yeah,
that I've talked about is sabotage.
that's so cool. So you said, all right, that's what it really wants to be, right? That's what the book really wants to be.
Yes.
I so feel you about the grief. I lost my mother quite a while ago, and I maybe just started really figuring out like how that affected everything.
Yes.
And I'm sort of fascinated by grief because we all go through it, it unites us, and maybe people don't know how to talk about it in, America anyway. Our culture is not, we don't have a lot of space for it. And I was just, I spiraled because I had little kids. It was a shock when my mother died. It was like 22 years ago.
Okay.
And yeah, I didn't handle it well. So I talk about that. I talk about how to handle it better. So you handled it pretty well. You got a project going, and that's pretty healthy, I think. Yeah.
Maybe it was handling it well. I think.
And I also talk about, if you let it go, it can get, because I tend towards mild depression. And when you combine those two things, it's really bad. They call it, I guess, complicated grief. I was like, I teased my husband. I said, I didn't have regular grief. I'm like, I'm a type A. I had complicated grief.
Yes.
I made fun of it, but it was hard. It was really hard. And I think it lasts longer than people are taught. We're taught like, you'll power through this, but especially not if it's your mom.
Yes. And if it happened in an unexpected way or traumatic way.
Oh, that's even worse. Right.
Adds another layer because it's really like it was so unexpected. It was out of nowhere. It was like you didn't see it coming. And so that adds another layer that makes it complicated.
It does. I actually attended a seminar. My friend told me about a virtual seminar about it. I'm just sort of fascinated by what the brain does when you lose someone. And they talked about how your brain still holds that relationship, and you're still, halfway, you're not really believing for a while that the person's gone. And I had that big time. Like, you just keep thinking you're going to call them, or I even saw her. I saw my mother. We were on vacation. We walked by a restaurant. I was like, it just looked so much like my mother. I couldn't believe it. And it's not logical at all,
No.
So much of it is not logical, but your brain is holding those two things. I found that really, really interesting, and
it is,
and heartbreaking, because you're not really anywhere for a while. You're just sort of.
Yeah. I think I told people, I described it as if I was just falling off a cliff, essentially, and there was just no bottom. Like there was.
God.
I never hit the ground. That's how it felt.
That's an amazing description. And it's scary as hell, because I remember I did finally go to a therapist because I wasn't getting better, and she said, she identified that I had stuffed down a lot of stuff, like a lot of us. Right. And she said, that doesn't go away. No. You can't keep doing that. and you have to go through your feelings. And I was like, okay. And I told her, I felt like if I started crying, I would never stop, like that bottomless feeling. And I think it just made me more compassionate when I went through that. I ended up more empathetic and more compassionate. And I feel like I could show, when people are grieving, I can show them, love and understanding, and I can be there for them.
Yes.
Which is a nice benefit, but it's very painful, and everyone goes through it. I mean, I wish we were more forthcoming about, what it's actually like.
Yeah. And, even before my mom, just as being a therapist, I had worked with people who had complicated grief, but it was complicated because of the relationship that they had with their parent.
That's a good point. Yep.
Wasn't always healthy. And so I had an understanding from that standpoint, but it wasn't until my mom passed and I realized how I was feeling, which wasn't complicated because of those things.
Right.
But I was like, I can only imagine the added layer if your relationship was not healthy.
Right.
Or if it was a complicated relationship, like just as an additional layer to what are you feeling, right? Are you angry? Are you sad? Or is it both?
It's a mix.
People, and in our society, we have this thing that you're supposed to always honor your mother and father, right? And so I imagine some of the people whose parents were not healthy and not good parents to them, trying to, grieve. And then you have people telling you that you're supposed to feel a certain way because they were your parents. And you're like, well, wait a minute. Like,
not everybody has that. It's funny you mentioned that, because I was incredibly close to my mother. Some might argue too close when I look back. It was just so hard to lose her. I mean, she was like my best friend, and I talked to her all the time, and we were just really close. And I'm so grateful that I had her. She was great. But that's really difficult to lose that kind of person. You don't know who you are without that person. But then I saw in my friends and my family, I saw they didn't understand. And I felt really sad, because I realized some of them didn't understand because they weren't close like that. And that made me even sadder. Like, it was just like, it's almost like finding all these ways to be sad. I did have a close friend who had a really difficult relationship with her mom. And it was so much harder for her because, there were those, she's a very honest person. And she said, it wasn't great. It wasn't great. But there were things. I think what's great is over the years, she remembers some good things and she holds on to those. But that's a really good point. In fact, I was looking at different kinds of grief that we don't call grief. Like losing, a lot of people lose their jobs. I got laid off from a job I loved, and everybody's like, you're professional, you're supposed to be cool about it, move on. And I just get attached to people. I was so sad. And luckily I was doing this reading on grief. I was like, well, you're grieving. It's obvious and it's okay. But people don't call it that. Or like if your ex-husband dies, right? That's a great example of, well, he's your ex-husband. Yeah, but we were married.
Like something, clearly we were married, right?
It was, you don't know what to do with those different kinds of grief. So yeah, I'm sorry, I sideswiped this to grief, but anyway, so I guess I would like to know, so that people know, what's one of the signs, like people might not even realize they're self-sabotaging. Like, what's one of the signs that they are? Like, how can they pick up on the fact that they might be doing that?
The easiest sign is to look at some of your patterns in previous, situations to see, are you always starting something new and never finishing something? That's one way, right? Another one would be, are you a person who feels like you can't start something until everything is just right?
Oh gosh, yes.
That's those perfectionists, right? The other one is, are you someone who every time you're going to start something, you find 50 new ways that you still need more information and more education or certifications or something in that arena? So those are some of the very common signs that you might be sabotaging yourself.
I think it's really good for all of us to take a look at that, because I know I was and didn't really identify it for years. And for me, it was fear, like fear of going through with it, not feeling competent enough, as you mentioned, not feeling like I could really, I have no right to do that, just not seeing myself. I think that's really good to ask those questions about ourselves, because what's the point, like just to keep repeating these patterns.
Right. And then there's, one that happens after you've started to kind of understand sabotage. and you've started reaching some of your goals, or you're, breaking some of those patterns, there's one that shows up that we never really think about. And that is the one that's fear of losing relationships. And so there is some information, and there's things where people start to sabotage themselves because they don't want to be too far away from their family and friends, social, economically, physically, knowledge wise. So you find that people will start to slow themselves down or not go for their next level goal because they don't want to be, an outsider in their family and friend group.
That is powerful. Yeah. You don't want to leave them, and you don't want to make that distance. You don't want to create that distance. That's very powerful. That applies to a lot of people.
Yes. Yeah. And so those are kind of the common things that you can see. And then, of course, if you take the quiz, you will kind of learn some more, because the questions, I tried to make them really fun.
They are. Yeah. I love the movie references.
Lighthearted. Yeah. Some of the movies and songs and things like that. And I recognize that, some people don't know those things. And so I try to put little disclaimers in there and just like descriptors so that you could know kind of what it was, if you had never seen the movie or heard the song.
Yeah, that was good.
Taking the quiz, and then the book is available if you are someone who just wants to read the book and get the general basic information. I wrote the book in 2018. So so much has changed since then, that I'm actually in the process of creating a course that will come out early 2024. So definitely take the quiz to get on my mail list, or just at least sign up for my mail list, so that you can be notified if you are interested in overcoming self-sabotage, because that's what we're going to be doing in that course.
I love that idea. They just sort of handhold people and get them through that. I love the idea of a course. All right. So I'm going to put all that in the show notes.
Okay.
And your website and how they can get in touch with you. And do they get your book on Amazon? Is that the best way?
You can get the book on Amazon. That's probably the easiest route. You can also order it through my website, and I can mail you a copy. But if you are a person that wants it really quickly, Amazon is your fastest route.
Okay.
But yeah. Good. And then I do have a podcast that is on hiatus, but the episodes are still available. It's called Life Save Her, the podcast. So
what's it called? I'm sorry.
Life Save Her.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's available wherever we get our podcasts?
Anywhere you get your podcasts. The episodes are from this year and previous years. We're trying to decide how we're going to bring that back for 2024. But it is definitely available. And there's episodes where it's just me talking. There's episodes where I've got guests on and we're talking about personal development and things like that, because that's typically where people are comfortable to talk about sabotage, is in the personal development realm. But in the course, we're going to dive in deep to what your sabotage, situation style really is, and really helping you overcome it. So we're going to get into some deep stuff.
I love that. You might want to consider, I'm in another course, of course. I'm a course taker.
I love it.
I'm in Amy Porterfield's course about creating a digital course. It's a wonderful course.
I just finished that. Yeah.
No, you did. You were probably in the same one I was.
The one that it just ended recently?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't it great?
It is. I had no idea.
This is great. I love it. So maybe you want to do what she does, which is, I thought was so clever. Tie in some of your podcast episodes to your course, like recommend, like go listen to this episode, I thought that was brilliant.
That is definitely on my plan.
I'm going to do a course. It's funny too. I didn't know what I was going to do. Mm-hmm. And then it just kind of fell into my lap, is the thing I do all the time professionally, which is write. I'm a technical writer. Okay. And everywhere I go, I'm a consultant. Everywhere I go, people make the same mistakes. Yes, and, writing's a skill. You can learn it, but some people don't think of it that way. They think of it like, oh, you're a writer or you're not a writer. So my course will be how to, communicate clearly in business, how to do business writing better, like tips and tricks, make it easy for people. So I'm working on that. That's so cool. I love that course. I can't say enough about Amy Porterfield, because I've actually taken other like shorter courses, and the people were good, but they're not her.
Mm-hmm. Yes, for sure.
And what's cool is that she's tight with Kathy Heller, who I also love, and they're just they give more of themselves. They just do. So yay! Plug out a little plug for them.
Yes.
Well, I'm excited to see your course and hear about what you do, and I hope we keep in touch, because it's been great talking to you. Now, is
Yes.
there anything else we missed? Is there anything you'd like to tell us?
I think that's it. Just,
Okay.
remember to start identifying. Don't be afraid to explore your self-sabotage style. Don't be afraid to explore changing it. And don't be afraid to save yourself, so to speak. So
That's a great message. Thank you so much.
thank
And
you.
best of luck on that course. And I'll put it all, make sure you send me the course info too, and
I
I'll
will.
put it all in the show notes.
Okay. Perfect. I sure will.
It was great talking to you.
Same to you. Thank you for having me.
It was really good.